Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. Thank you for attending, and I hope you're having a great conference. I'd like to introduce Drew, who will be presenting a session titled Getting Started with Site Designs and Site Scripts for Modern SharePoint Site Provisioning. Take it away, Drew.
Thanks, John. Just final check, make sure you can hear me, John.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Here today to talk about site design and site scripts, but I do want to start with making sure people are aware that it would have been nice to have been in Vegas at this point. I'm up in Wisconsin today, but next year we will be back. So 2021, mark your calendars to come back to the newly branded Microsoft 365 conference next year. We are here because of the sponsors again, so there are some rooms open. If you go into the landing page for the M365 Marathon, you can see and go talk to some of these great sponsors today. We are giving away some Oculus Quests and some other cool raffles, so make sure you do visit those booths, watch the videos, and submit your answers into the raffle. You can see the link here on the page. And one of the really cool things about this event is the funds coming back through charity. So there are donations already coming through the sponsors that have happened, but if you feel the need or would like to, we have it open to donate through the United Way and through the International Medical Corp. First, a little bit about me. So who am I? My name is Drew Madeline. I am based up in Wisconsin. News with me is I recently a little girl. I already put a headset on her, but I do Office 365 consulting. I really help a lot of larger organizations move into Office 365, but I do come from a background of really being an IT professional. So how things work, jumping into PowerShell and really starting to build things. And so today I will be talking a little bit more on the IT pro side of how kind of site designs work, along with the front end of what we see and really how provisioning has started from the beginning. I've been working with different provisioning aspects of SharePoint for a long time, back since 2007, 2010 time. I was started to build some different provisioning options, and site designs is one that we are now get to work with. So I will be talking really what are they, right? What are they doing, and then starting to say what is next, right? What else can we do with them? There's some basic functionality that I'm going to highlight, but then really starting to say let's take our site provisioning options and move it into modern provisioning and talk about why they're so much better than site templates today. So what we've seen with site provisioning is that it's evolved with the technology, and it's evolved with the workplace. It's evolved with how we've grown as a world, as a technology space. So in the SharePoint world, a lot of provisioning processes, the ones I've seen and helped build, were IT owned. They were help desk would request sites. You'd be using legacy site templates, and you're pretty much connected to just creating these SharePoint sites. And creating these things were not necessarily that easy, and there's nothing necessarily out of the box about it. And one of the biggest boundaries in there was that there was a request process in front of it, right? So I request something, you have some type of SLA to get the new site created, but in today's world, it needs to be quick, it needs to be fast. And that's where we see Office 365 and SharePoint Online coming through as far as self-service and group powered for faster template creation, right? It's about speed of getting things done. And that's really where site designs kind of come into play. So what are site designs? And what are site scripts? They've been around now for coming up on 2 years, but they have very specific meanings for why they use the word site designs and site scripts. And the first thing to make sure we understand is that a site design is a collection of site scripts. So scripts are things, scripts are actions, but a site design is a collection of site scripts. It could be one, it could be multi, it could be two, it could be 10. It's the multiple site scripts make up a site design. And site scripts are the actions. So let's say I wanted to create a column. Let's say I wanted to join a hub site, maybe create a new list, maybe change some permissions, maybe trigger a flow. Those are an action. And think of, when you combine the actions, you have a design. So once you have the design, you apply the design to a site. I'm not actually creating a site and building a template from the site, I'm building like a recipe. And the recipe is going to be what makes up our design. And then we apply the design or invoke the design onto a site or a subsite. So it does work on both. And when you apply a design, what it does is it executes the actions. So if I take a design, I say I want to, and I have 3 different scripts in it, 3 different actions. When I apply the design, it's going to execute those 3 actions, or technically executing those 3 site scripts. So when site designs happen, they can be done on site collection creation, manually whenever you want, or when you join a hub. So those are the different areas when you can apply a design. So the most common one by far is on-site collection creation. I create a site, I want to execute some actions, and the way that happens is by when I create the site, I pick the site design that I want to execute during site creation. And then if I had those 3 site scripts, it would trigger those 3 site scripts and apply them onto your site. So if it's a create a column, if it's create a list, if it's change permissions, those will all occur and be applied during site collection creation. So what that means, again, site designers are the containers for those actions. Now, what was really important to know about site designs is that they are not attached to a site. I don't take a site and say, let's say I have a site design called project site. So if I have a site design called project site, which executes actions, I'm not attaching and I create the site using project site. I'm not actually attaching that site design to the project site. All I'm doing is I'm executing the actions as part of the design onto that site. So any of the actions in project site would be applied when I create the site, but they're not attached to the site. And that also means that the site designs are not prepackaged. So I don't go out and I create a site and say, okay, I'm going to save this whole site and I'm going to take this site and I'm going to bundle it all up and say, this is my site. I'm going to move it and I'm going to replicate sites based exactly on this site. Some functionality I'll talk about to kind of get to that point, but it differs from site templates in that way. So if you go back into, if you're still using site templates in SharePoint Online, please stop. They're not good. What happens is with site templates, if they were considered prepackaged, is they actually create a new site template itself. So if you're creating sites in SharePoint Online, you're actually creating site templates or creating sites using out-of-the-box site templates. So let's say you create a basic team site, you get an STS pound 2 or pound 1 site template. If I'm using custom site templates, the classic version of it, I'm actually going to take, instead of using that STS pound 1, I'm actually going to be creating a whole new one with a GUID, and I'm going to be creating sites using that GUID. So I'm packaging that site and I'm making a copy of it. What happens then is, as things change on STS pound 1, they're not going to change on your site because you're actually taking a different copy of that site. You're not actually using that root site or the out-of-the-box site because you prepackaged that site and created a new one. So that's one big reason why site design logic was built, because that site template logic in an evergreen world of the cloud doesn't function. We need to create the site and apply things on top of it. So we're not packaging it, we're building a design. The design gets applied to it and not attached to it. What that means is that the site has to exist first. So the site exists and then we apply the design on top of it. The intricacies with where a challenge can come into play and why they're not packaged and attached, or because they're not packaged and attached, is if you update a design. So let's say I'm a project site that has those 3 actions. Let's say I add a 4th action to that design. Since that design is not attached to a site, it does not go back and retroactively change anything. It's a new design. I can go back and apply that design on existing sites, and all new sites will get it. But it's just like changing. It's just adding something to the design, and it's not retroactively going to go back and update any existing. The out-of-the-box templates, as I was just talking about, are not changed. So if I create a new team site in SharePoint Online, it uses group pound 0. if I create a new team site, it's going to use group pound 0 and that's it. And I'm going to apply a design on top of it. I'm not going to be using any other out-of-the-box templates. And STS3 is the non-Office 365 group-backed modern team site. And what's with this is that the new goodness, this new functionality is added on top. You're not going to break something. So as let's say the new Microsoft list functionality comes out, if they have dependencies on that list template or on your site template, you're not going to break that because you used a site template. It's going to be added onto it. And that's really where some of the great magic happens when you're using site designs. So a really good way to think about this is that site designs are the interior decorator for a new house, and site scripts are the thing that they do. So I build a new house, the house is going to be there, and I want to do something in that house. I'm going to apply a bunch of different, add a bunch of different things into the house. I'm going to put a couch in here, I'm going to put stuff up on the wall, I'm going to paint the walls green. I might change the door, add another door, add some windows, and the interior decorator is going to help plan that out. The site scripts are going to be the actual things of like, I want to move the couch is going to move. I want to paint that wall. That site script could be just paint that wall. But again, that house already exists. I'm not taking a copy of that house and moving that house somewhere else. I could take that same design. Let's say I built 5 new houses. I could take that same design and apply it to all those same 5 houses. All those houses will look the same, but they will have the same, the house will have to be there first. So how do they work? What's the infrastructure of them? So they are built. Site scripts are going to be the actions that are built actually with JSON, and they have functionality into it to say I want to have actions, and those actions will have different things that you can do, and then the designs themselves are going to have different things like title, description, what template they're going to be applied to, and what site scripts are going to be a part of it. And when you bring those together, that will give you the user experience of when I create a new team site or a new communication site, it'll give me the drop down to say what site design do I want to pick. Or if the site's already been created, go back and let's look at site designs that have, or go back and look at site designs that have been applied, or potentially apply a new one manually. So it goes from I create a site design, I apply a site design, then I can actually continuously reuse or use site designs again. So when do I see these being used a lot? So first of all, applying logic consistently when new sites are created. So this is the most common scenario is I create a new site. I want to apply a couple different things onto that site or a lot, but organization or application specific logic. I want to create a new project site and it's going to have these 4 lists. These are the lists that are mandated by my company. And by default, every site's going to get it. Maybe another good example I see is I want to apply some type of analytics solution to every site. So I could potentially deploy an analytics solution using site designs, and every time a site is created, I'm going to get analytics deployed to it. Or maybe I want to change, maybe the most basic one is I want to enforce a theme and apply a theme for all of my sites that get created. So by default, I can create a site. Maybe if it's a department site, I can say all department sites are blue, all communication sites are green, and you can actually enforce that using site designs to apply logic when new sites are created. One that I don't see used as often, but can be very helpful is amending out-of-the-box templates. So let's say I wanted to change or apply something after the fact. Right? So let's say I wanted to go out and deploy content types to a bunch of existing sites. You absolutely can do that. I can go back in and I can apply things across the board or change that functionality of that core template by not of the core template, but change it after the fact of applying certain things without on team site creation, but whenever you want, kind of your choice by updating existing sites with elements that you want to change. So a big one I see here for when to use site designs is for content type deployment. And let's say you have, I use this as an example with a customer where instead of using the content type hub, I wanted to target a collection of content types into a smaller section of sites. I actually created a site design called deploy content types. I I built that site design, executed that site design against all those existing sites, removed the site design because I didn't need it. And at that point, I had content types on all of the sites that I needed. Maybe I wanted to go back in and change the theme for everyone's existing site. Maybe I want to change even the permissions. You can do that to existing sites. So it actually can be used as an administrative tool, not just an end user tool. So if you ever have scenarios where I need to go fix something on a site or add something on a site, site designs may be your option to be able to deploy those. So what does that look like? So from a site design standpoint or site creation standpoint, where you're going to see most the main part of this is when I go into create site in SharePoint. When I click create site, I can pick team site or communication site, and then you see up here you can say choose a design. And what you're going to see when I say choose a design, everyone gets team site. But I added a couple other here. I added project site in a hub, and I added one called fancy site. So what these are actually the site designs that I've deployed. And what this means is that there is a collection of site scripts behind the scenes that are part of these site designs. I did the same thing when I created a communication site. When I create a communication site, we have the 3 default ones that are applied. And then I also created one called advanced design. So this is a site design that I deployed. And if you think about it, the power of this is an end user can come in and I can create a design and I can empower my end users to create it. I take away the burden of IT in the middle of it. And if I wanted to create some fancy design for a communication site, I can come in and I can have my users do it themselves. Now, the other area I can look at this is in ones that are already been created. So if I created a site, actually, yeah, let's just create a site. So I'm going to create a site and let's create one called, I'm going to use one called fancy site. So you'll see I pick my design, it's called fancy site. And let's call this fancy. You'll see so that's definitely available. I'm going to say next, I'm going to create a site called fancy. And what's going to happen, so first creates the site, and when I click finish, if I get to the page fast enough, you're going to see a yellow bar on top here, say applying site design. We're updating your site based on the design that you chose. So the users actually get to see if a site design is being applied. And you'll see the color of this site right now is blue. It's a nice little light blue. So I come back and look at it, it says the site design has been applied. Refresh this site to see the changes. So when I refresh this site, what you're going to see is my site now has some really good looking colors. And what actually happened there? So if I come into the gear and I go into site designs under the gear, I can actually see site designs that have been applied to my site. So when I created the site, it applied a site design called fancy site. And what was in that site was an action that was an apply theme action where I applied the theme really pretty. Now, really pretty is this wonderful Easter green and pastel pink. I think it's really pretty. So I wanted to make sure that when I created a fancy site, I got to have this color. And it actually shows me when it was applied. Now, you also see in the bottom in this wonderful hot pink text that I can click available site designs. When I pick available site designs, you're going to see the collection of site designs available to me, including another one on here. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but what I can do is I can apply other site designs to the site after the fact if I wanted to. So if I came in and I wanted to, let's say I had another design here that would make sense, like I run allow external or advanced design, I could trigger that. And that would let me do that after the fact if I wanted to by hand. So let's actually come in and I'll go into another site that already exists. So let's go into this sensitive team site. So refresh it, and I'm going to pull up the site design panel on here. And what we're going to see is that I had no site designs that ran on this team site, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to apply fancy site. So the site's already been created. I can click apply to site. You're going to see we're updating the site based on the design. I'm applying fancy site. What it's doing is applying the theme of really pretty, and I'll be able to come back, and once this is done, once it's applied, it'll be, you'll get that same wonderful looking green and pink that is beautiful to everyone's eyes. What that actually looks like from a site script standpoint. So this right here is actually all it is. So you have a schema, and what you do is you have an actions that have a verb and properties. So this is actually an example of a site script where I have a theme that's being applied, and the verb is apply theme, and my theme is really pretty. So that's actually an example of a site script that I'll be jumping into here in a minute. As I'm pulling this up, the next kind of step is going through is administration of this, right? So how do these get built? How do these work? How do these function? How can I build them? There are things that you need to know when they are being built. First of all, is that they are not destructive. So if I create a site and I create libraries and lists in there, I don't have a site design does not have the ability to remove those libraries and lists. What it will do is it'll actually append to it. So a good example of this is, let's say I'm doing a hub site join. So whenever I create a hub site, let's say I'm creating a column, creating a list and creating some columns, I leave that hub site and I join another hub site that has a different site design applied to it. It will not retroactively go change anything. All it's going to do is put the new design in place. If there's columns with the same name, it won't change them. So it won't be destructive. When looking at how many site scripts and site designs you can have 100 site scripts and 100 site designs in your tenants. And when I think of building these, I think a good way to think about them is to modularize your site scripts in ways that can be more repeatable. So you can put a lot of things in your site scripts. You can put a lot of actions. You can have up to 300 actions or 100,000 characters. They used to be very small. That has moved up, thankfully. But when you think about building site scripts, think about what is repeatable. What are things that I want to do multiple times, and package those things together. So the site script I showed only had one action. Well, let's say from a project, it might make sense to have 4 or 5 actions in there. But if I wanted to apply that really pretty theme into many other sites, it might make sense just to have a site script just to say, apply that theme, and then whatever site design that I want to apply that theme in, I can add that site script to it. Because as I said before, site designs can handle multiple site scripts. One thing that has been fun is that they don't just run on modern sites, so it looks actually just at the site collection itself. And they can run on classic sites. So if you are deploying or managing sites by hand, or like if I wanted to go back and retroactively add a bunch of stuff, you absolutely could do that to any site that you have in SharePoint Online and apply a site design to it. One great nuance is that they do run in order. So when you're thinking about your site scripts, and it's really powerful, or it's really important when you're building libraries and lists and columns, especially if you're doing site columns, is things need to, if you have dependencies, they need to run in the specific order, and debugging that can be a little hard. So make sure that you know what needs to come first, right? I can't create a list with a column in it unless the column exists. So if you have site scripts that are going to create columns, make sure those run before site scripts that create lists. When you start breaking into site scripts, you start to see that they're built with actions and verbs. And the actions and verb part of it is all JSON. So this is definitely not something that you're going to want to mess with by hand. It can be quite complicated and not very fun. There's some really good builders out there that I'll show you at the end for how you can put some of these things together. So I've never had an expectation for someone to build these, but it's important to understand the structure because you may be editing them after the fact. And what is important is that you have those verbs and you have the properties inside of those. And those verbs are what those actions are. So you'll see create SP list. I'm going to set description of that list. I'm going to add a content type to that list. I'm I'm going to add a field to that list, and then after that, I'm going to trigger a flow as an example. So what that means is that you can put parent of sub actions. So sub actions in a parent. So I create a list as an action, set description is a sub action of that create list verb. And what can we do? This is changing. The link in here, and I'll show you what it is that there's a JSON format schema that's out there that keeps track of what is available to us. And these are the functionality that's the stuff in blue is the newer functionality from end of last year and this year. Some nice ones in here, and we now have a new ability to change nav links, set some site branding, activate site features. The most common ones I see are definitely fields and columns, columns and lists. Getting those things out there onto new sites has been really probably the most common one, followed up by triggering the flow. And I'll talk a lot more about that, but triggering flow is a big one. And the last one is actually you're able to install SPFX solutions. So in the example I talked about earlier of having having analytics be ran, or let's say I want to add an analytics solution, and I can package that up in SharePoint and SPFX, and part of my site design can deploy that. So I can add some things, some type of extension or some type of list view command set to do what you need. And all of this together tells you that you can do different things for components, apps, or branding. The big one is around kind of manipulating files. It's really not built to manipulate files or anything like that yet, or kind of create pages. There's some stuff on the roadmap really to get that moving forward. So how do you work with them? You are stuck with PowerShell. The only way to manipulate these is through PowerShell, to create them, to edit them. There is no UI for this on the front end. There's a lot of different actions for them. The most important ones to know is they're still called site scripts and site design. So whatever your verb is, get, add, remove, SPO site script or SPO site design. Those are going to be your main ones that you need to use. So what's the process of creating and running through site designs? The first thing you need to do is actually create your site scripts. Then you create your site design. You can manage your site design, apply it, and then actually see and manage kind of after the fact to see what's happened. So for creation, the first thing you need to do is to create your site script. You do need to create a JSON file somewhere or get a JSON blob somewhere that has that information. And then what you'll do is you'll run a add SPO site script commandlet to add the site script into your tenant. And just creating that, though, all that means is that there's now an available site script in your tenant to do something. So going all the way back up to the beginning, when I showed that really pretty JSON file, if I added that, I can create that, load it, and then I can add it to my tenant, and I then have the site script in my tenant. When I create the site design, you're going to use the add SPO site design commandlet. Now, this will probably, from a option standpoint, this definitely has your most options and the most end user impact. So the big one is what web template is. So web template will define what drop down will I see my site design. If it's 64, it's going to be for team sites, and if it's 68, it's for comm sites. If it's 1, that means it's actually going to be used for a groupless team site, but also be available for users when they want to apply design after the fact. So that is the big one. The last one there is that the dash is default. So let's say I wanted to auto apply labels to all default sites. So when I click new site and it says team site or showcase or topic, I can actually say is default, and it will by default run that design without having to change the name. So if I don't want to create any other ones and I just want to say I pick team site, you can still overwrite team site by using the dash is default in the 64 web template. What you can do for managing site designs is control who can see them and who can't. So if I wanted to create a site design, let's say just for a department or just for a team, maybe only project managers can create project sites. You can actually grant design rights or view rights to that site design using the grant SPO site design rights commandlet. So again, the most common one I see is around departmental site. So I can create a departmental site and say only HR, only IT. You get certain properties or certain colors, certain themes when I do create those. Now, when you apply it, you can apply it as I showed through the UI. So you can go back in during the site creation process or do it through the site design panel. Or you can apply it through PowerShell. So if you're looking at automating any of this or instituting this as part of another provisioning process, there are two ways to do it. One, and this has changed in the past. So what originally came out was called Invoke SPO Site Design. And that actually has a limit. That is a limit of 30 actions in a site script. And if I create a site script, or if I invoke, if I run that PowerShell commandlet with a site design that is more than 30 actions, it will fail. So what happens, or what we have now, is what's called a site design task. And what actually functions now is that instead of invoking it instantly, it queues it up for a job to go run it. So think of how many people are now in SharePoint? 100 million people are probably actively using SharePoint. I mean, it doesn't, obviously not all use site designs, but think of if you just allow people, or we were all allowed to just invoke and perform server-based activity whenever we want. I'm going to run this, and it could be really big. Well, instead, it queues up now. It still happens very quickly, and you should definitely start using, if you're not using add SPO site design task for all of your existing PowerShell functionality. Now, what's really fun with these is debugging. If you want to go see how things failed or how they worked, the UI is a little challenging, but you can get details of your design run. So let's say I created that fancy site and I want to go back and see what happened. I can go back and look at that run and actually get the details of that run, and it will actually spit out better error reporting for us to see what happened. Or if you wanted to come back and look at all of your sites and see if any of them failed across your tenancy, you can use that by getting that site design run. So what does that look like? So I'm going to jump into the wonderful world of PowerShell here, and I'm going to pull up one. So here is a site script that I created called Site Design Flow. This is actually going to trigger a flow, and I'm going to pass in a couple of parameters into it. But the important part is I am going to first load that site script into a variable, and then I'm actually going to add that site script. Sorry, I'm going to load it and add it at the same time. So over here on the right, you're going to see I add the add SPO site script, site design flow. Now what I can do is I can say git SPO site script. Right here, you're going to see I added a site script called site design flow. And for anyone who has not worked with SharePoint Online PowerShell, you can download it through the PowerShell gallery. I missed the connection creds, but you do connect using Connect SPO service. And once you're on that, all of the functionality that I'm demonstrating, you'll have the ability to do. So as an example, if you want to look at all the site scripts I have in this tenant, I can say git SPO site script, and I'll just select title and ID. And you'll see here is a collection of site scripts that I have in my tenant. And I actually just added the same one twice because I was doing this right earlier. But I do now have two site scripts called Site Design Flow. But you also have multiple other ones in here that I've been working with. Now, if I wanted to create a site design, what I can do is I'm going to say add SPO site design right here, and I'm passing in a bunch of different variables. So I'm going to create one called new project site. So if I run this is going to get my site script and add the SPO site design called new project site. So now if I say get SPO site design, you'll see I now have a site design called new project site. And we'll just see, here are the other 4 designs that you saw. When I opened up that site design panel, you saw the actions to do any of these 4 on that sensitive site. And I now have a 5th one called new project site. When I do go into that, so if I'd say, let me look at site design, and I look at what I have here, I have it applied to web template 1. So actually that would not show up under any team site dropdown. And here's the collection of site scripts that are actually being applied to it. Here's my preview image. You'll see is default is set to false. So if I went out into SharePoint and I went to SharePoint, and I click create sites, what you're going to see that I don't have that option here. I click team site, which is 64. I don't have that option under this location. Now, if I come back in here and I set the web template to 64, see now it says 64 right there. Jump back into here. Click on SharePoint again. I don't need to save that. I'll create a site. I click on team site. Now you see new project site. If I changed it to 68, it would actually bump over to the com site. But right here, look at that. I have new project site. Pretty cool. Continuing down this wonderful route. If I want to remove it, I can absolutely remove it. For this example, I'm not going to, but I could. Just actually as an example, let's get rid of one of those site scripts because I created one twice. So let's go script. Let's get rid of that last one I created. So this one right here, this 3E611 GUID. And you do need to work with GUIDs in this. Try to write some ones where I'm only using variables. For this one, I'll say remove SPO site script. And I'll put that identity. And now if I get SPO site script again, you'll see I do only have one site script in here. The same would happen if I was looking at site designs. Now, if I go back and I look at my site designs, you see my new project site has what's called site script IDs. So right now I have 2 in there. One is actually of a site script I just deleted. So we do need to make sure we change that. Now I'm going to add 3 into this one. So Contoso advanced lists, Contoso formatted lists, and add project site to directory. I'm going to add these 3 into my site design. Now I could do this all out for you by hand, but I've already preconditioned this. So these are the GUIDs of those site scripts right here, those 3. And I will run this. And now you'll see when I look at my site design, I have these 3 now set. So those are going to be the actions that are run these 3 right here, because they match, they match the site design, or the site script IDs are now added into the site script IDs value for that site design. Now I can obviously remove it too. So if I wanted to remove them and get rid of one of those values, such as Contoso formatted lists, absolutely can purge that site design, or sorry, that site script from that site design. A handy one is knowing, so if I look at this last site design, I see I have these 3 values and it's cryptic, right? I have 3 IDs, they're not easy to consume. What I can do is I can get and view all my site scripts. So let's say what I'm doing is I'm going to get my site design, and then I'm going to get the site scripts from it. What that can show me is that for this site design, I'm using these 3 site scripts. Now, let's say I wanted to control who has access to that. So if I come over here and I look at Hank Aaron, and I go click create site, Hank Aaron can see new project site. What if I didn't want to have Hank Aaron create new project site? What I can actually do is I can set the site design rights for Hank Aaron. And what I'm going to do is what you do is you pass in a group. So I have a group called Advanced Site Designs, which does not include Hammer and Hank. I can run this, and now when Hammer and Hank comes back to look at his sites to go create, I actually have quite a few more security controls than that, so he's not going to see much at all. You'll see that one is gone. Kept those 2, so instead of the other ones, but the new ones, the new project site is no longer there because he's not part of that AD group, or that mail-enabled group that will show who has access to it. Now, applying a site design, what I want to show is that to apply a site design, you can invoke it. So I can do it through PowerShell. So if I took a site design, let's go look at advanced design here. I have a site called advanced design. Now, what I can do, I'm going to run a, see, I have some libraries and lists already created on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run a site design called advanced design. And I'm going to invoke that site design on that web. So I run this. This is the same as going through the design panel. So if I went through the design panel, you'll see that this is actually going to do a bunch of different things. So when I come to the site, I go look at site designs. You're actually going to see this very first one right here. Me running it earlier today is I've ran this advanced design on this site. This was all done through PowerShell. I look over on the right, it did a lot of cool different things. It created a column, it created a list, it added a view, it created another list, it created more details on a list, it added navigation elements in there. And when I come into that and I look at some of this data, I have things like project collateral, which is a list I created. I have a list called project activities, which is another list that I created. When I look at editing this list, it actually has this way. When I create a new item in this list, there are things that you can add into it that would not normally expect. So what's kind of nice, too much stuff. Oh, that's a bad one. Wrong site. So what it will happen is that this actually can handle conditional formatting. So one of the things that does come through is if I did do the conditional formatting for columns or conditional formatting for lists, it does allow you to bring that across as part of the site design. And by applying it by hand, you'll see, or by applying it through PowerShell, it is the same as applying it through the UI, adding and creating all these different columns. If I want to see what actually has been run on it, I can definitely come in here and I can say get SPO site design run on this web, and I run the selection. You'll see here's that same experience of what has ran on this site and when. So I can really start to dig into that. So if I wanted to see what's been run, when it hasn't, where this really comes into play is if I made a change. So let's say, you see I've ran advanced design on this site over and over again. Let's say I changed advanced design, which I did, which is why that little experience didn't work back there. I went back in and you want to find all the sites that have had advanced design run on, I can do that. And then I can query that. I can query all the ones that's been ran on and reapply it. So say I updated advanced design, go find all the sites that advanced design ran on and rerun advanced design because I added a column. And all of that, it can happen because of get SPO site design run. So I said there's some other cool things you could do. What else can you do? You can set a site design for a hub site. So every time someone joins a hub, you can have a site design get applied. You can do it through the UI. So when you go into hub site settings, you can say site design applied to associated sites. And that will then apply the hub site, or that will apply the site design when you join the hub site. So that's very helpful for doing certain things. Maybe I want to deploy content types for all of my hub. Maybe I want to add navigation links anytime someone joins, or maybe add a manager or something like that to make sure that they all have access to these. So definitely all possible through site designs. Templates in JSON. So I said it was hard. You never want to mess with JSON. You never want to go by hand. What you can do is you can start with a list or start with a site. And what you're going to do is you're actually going to get the JSON from that list. So I can create a list, create a library, and I can export it into a JSON format. Now this is a great starting point. So instead of, if you're building a provisioning solution, go create your lists and create your site and then show people, create it online, and then copy it down. So there's not going to be any confusion about what the list is going to look like after that point. And this takes it out into a format which you then can follow to say, I'm going to extract this to a file and I'm going to add that as a site script. You can also do it by web. So you can't technically template a site, but you can get the site script of an existing SharePoint site. And you can include different actions into it. So if I want to get SPO site script from web, that's the command you run. You can get things like branding, theming, regional settings, and you can declare your lists and libraries. So the dash include lists will tell you which libraries and lists we're going to extract. So you can get pretty close to building, let's say, a project site and then having it appear. You can get having it be worked with by people prior to having the site design be built, because you can say, here's my site, look at all the stuff on it. Great, let's extract this out and then let's build our site designs from that. The most powerful one from an action standpoint is trigger flow. So bringing in Power Automate into this functionality. So that if you think back to that little wheel I had, there is only a set of functionality that you have available to it. But there are things that you could do through flow, whether it's maybe you want to send an email, maybe you want to add something to a SharePoint list. That's actually what one of my site actions does. Maybe I want to start an approval. Maybe I want to connect to ServiceNow. It doesn't really matter. But because you can trigger a flow, you'll put in the URL of your flow, and that will run during your site design. Right, so really cool, really good way, and really powerful to do things that if you see any limitations site designs, trigger the flow and figure out a way to run it through that. Because then you can connect to Graph, you can connect to what Azure Automation. It's really up to you. Where you can really start to piece this together is through P&P provisioning. So there is a full P&P provisioning framework available to anyone. It's fully open source. It has a lot of templating capability that you can kind of combine. So if you do see limitations as far as from site designs, you can, and you're really more of maybe a really robust enterprise provisioning solution, you absolutely can do that through the combination of that trigger flow action and then having Power Automate run that will move and perform actions inside of using the P&P functionality. There are REST APIs for this. So if you really wanted to manipulate site designs and site scripts, you definitely can from a CRUD operation standpoint. So if you are building something maybe more to definitely invoke or get the site designs or see what's on a site, if you're building SPFX web parts for them, you can get all of that through REST as well. So what can you really want? Again, why would you want to do this? So site designs give you a flexible model. They give you the ability to provide consistent functionality across your enterprise. It gives you a much easier way to ensure when you recreate functionality, it's consistent. I don't have to go in and create certain things or apply certain things or set navigation on all of these sites by hand or anything. I can apply them through in a consistent way using the design. And remember, the design is not a copy of a site. It's the application of that design on top of a site that will apply those settings, call those custom solutions, and really inject and add some power into your provisioning capabilities. Some of the limitations for them, you can't do things like configuring web parts or setting site collection features. The creating page actions is still in the schema, but if you're kind of in the file manipulation standpoint, you do want to start looking at the P&P side of it. Challenges with hub sites and inheritance. So as I said, you can deploy these into subsites. The example you saw from advanced design, that was actually me working with trying to break it from an inheritance standpoint and trying to apply site columns and libraries and lists on subsites and their parent sites. Make sure if you are working on subsites, that you do test that. And now when you're setting the site logo, this one kind of bothers me, but you can only do one for comm sites. So Smaller limitations, big one I see is the file part or the site collection features, where you do need to kind of branch apart and like configure those pages for like a landing page. It's really popular. So hopefully those limitations will mature, but don't take those away as why not to use site designs. Think of the opportunities of when you can use site designs to really bring them into your enterprise. So I did say there were some builders. Those links are out here. There's a sitedesigner.io and sptools.netlify that are available. GitHub has a bunch of site design. It's already for you, site script examples for you. And you can actually deploy a site design studio right using SPFX onto your site as well. So don't ever think that you need to start site scripts by hand. Use the builders that are out there. Check out the JSON schema that's out with the overview if you have questions about where things are kind of coming or going. But because there is a lot of materials out here, so don't get too consumed with like kind of looking at the PowerShell or thinking about building it. Once you build one, I promise you, you'll see that it's not too bad, and you can go out and build some more. So with that, I'm kind of right at the time for kind of open for questions, for contacting me. Email me, reach out to me on social anytime. My website does actually have some, and GitHub does have some materials for me that I put together for all of the PowerShell scripts that I talked about today. So if you go to my GitHub or my website, there is a post out there all about all of the PowerShell that I have. You guys can take that, go run with it, make it your own, so you don't even need to type any of this stuff up. So hopefully that's a great piece of material for moving forward. And with that, I'll take a pause and see if there are any questions.
Thanks a lot, Drew. We did have a few questions in the chat, but we're at time. So if you want to stick around and maybe answer those via text,
sure,
that would be good. And then we can go back to the producer slides so people can get on to the next session they have scheduled. But thanks a lot. This was great content.
Thank you.